Hey everybody, how's it going? My name's Paul. I started the DiceyReview.com, and tonight we're going to be showing you how to play a game called Treasure Hunter by Richard Garfield, published by Queen Games. This is a game for 2 to 6 players, takes around an hour to play, and is a whole lot of fun. I really enjoy it and played it a ton this year. If you don't know Richard Garfield, he's a designer of Magic the Gathering and King of Tokyo, games like that. He's a huge influence within the industry, and I think an amazing designer. But I'm a big fan of this game, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to play it. First, what we'll do is we'll show you how to set it up. Most of the setup honestly has been done already. What you'll do to set up the game is you'll take the board and put it out like this. There are 2 puzzle pieces, you'll put those together. Set the board in the middle of the table. You'll take all of the treasure tiles and all of the goblin tiles and put them face down near the board somewhere. You're going to be drawing them throughout the game to fill up the spaces on the board. And then you're going to take all of the money. As you can see, there's coins over here in 1, 2, 3, 10, and 20. And you'll take those and set those near the board. And then you'll put the round marker on the top space. After that, you're going to fill in all the spaces on the board with just 6 random treasure tiles and 3 random goblin tiles, and then you'll be ready to start dealing out cards. One other quick thing to mention is you're going to give each player 15 coins to start the game. So we'll go ahead and do all that and then show you what it looks like. Alright, as you can see, the board is set up with some treasure tiles, and I have given myself $15 here. And we are ready to start the game. So what's going to happen is the starting player is going to take all of these cards, they're going to shuffle them up, and then they're going to deal out 9 cards to each player. This is a card drafting game, and what that means is that on your turn, you are going to receive a hand of 9 cards, like I said, and you are going to be looking at these cards, picking one of the cards that you think is the best to keep, and then passing the remaining cards that you don't pick to your neighbor, to the left or to the right. If you've ever played Seven Wonders, if you've ever played certain forms of Magic the Gathering, you're probably familiar with this concept, but we'll go ahead and go through it just to give you a feel for how it works. This is what your starting hand might look like. But before we get into actually card drafting and what these cards all mean, what they do, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about the board and the different phases. So in Treasure Hunter, you are going to be playing 5 rounds that'll be tracked by this little marker over here, and within each round there are 4 different steps. So there's going to be the blue phase, green phase, red phase, and then the goblins over here. And I call them phases. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to compete for these 2 treasures, you're going to compete for these 2 treasures, you're going to compete for these 2 treasures, and then you're going to try and escape from the goblins without being robbed a little bit. They'll take some of your money. So basically what's going to happen on each player's turn is based on the treasures that are out on the board. They can be good treasures like this one, or they can be bad treasures like this one up here. You're going to try and draft the highest number or the lowest number of cards within each area. So for instance, there's going to be cards numbered 1 through 12 for blue, there's going to be cards numbered 1 through 12 for green, and there's going to be cards numbered 1 through 12 for red. And what you're going to be doing is trying to get the highest or the lowest total number to get these treasures. And it's not the number of cards, it's the number on the cards. So what you'll do is, like for instance, for blue, if you had these 2 cards right here, in blue you would have a total of 19. And that would actually be bad because the highest number wins this negative treasure in that round. Okay, so that's kind of a little bit what you're going to be trying to do, is you're going to be trying to compete for these treasures by either having the highest number or the lowest number of all your combined cards. Okay, and now that we've talked a little bit about what you're going to be doing on each of these phases, we'll talk a little bit about the treasure tiles themselves. So as you can see out on the board, there are going to be 3 different types of treasure tiles. There's going to be treasure tiles that are just points, and that's what these tiles are right here. Like this is just 16 points at the end of the game. This is negative 6 points at the end of the game, so this one you actually don't want to win. There are in-game scoring tiles like this one right here. They're gray. And this one says that for every goblin tile you collect, which is something you can do later in the round, at the end of the game you're going to get $2. And money is points in this game, so $2 would essentially just be 2 points. So that is that's a good tile to get. There are also these yellow tiles, and these are one-time use kind of bonus treasures. So if you are able to collect this card, this tile, at the end of any round, for every blue card you played that round, you can turn this tile in, it leaves the game, and you're going to get $3 for every blue card you play. So for instance, if we go from the example that we used earlier of those 2 blue cards that we had in hand, if we played those 2 blue cards in that round, we might win a blue treasure, and then in addition, at the end of the round, we could turn in that tile to get 6 more points on top of that. So those yellow tiles are pretty good as well. Now, once you've competed for all of the treasures on the board, you're going to be trying to escape through this cave without being harmed by the goblins. And as you can see on the top left of the goblin tiles, there are numbers with paw marks next to them. So this bottom goblin, for instance, has a 3 with a paw mark, the middle goblin has a 1, and the top goblin has a 1 up there with a paw mark as well. What that means is that is the strength that you need to have to pass through these goblins without getting robbed. Because what will happen is if you don't have enough power to equal or beat this goblin right here, you're gonna have to pay him $1. In the same way, these goblins up here, if you don't have at least 1 power to defeat these goblins, you're gonna have to pay them $3. And how you get power to defeat those goblins is by drafting a certain type of card, a dog card. Now, if you were looking through this hand earlier, you can see that there's different colors and numbers with that. There's money. This will give you money at the end of the round. And then there's also these cards right here that are dogs. The dog cards will protect you from the goblins. So, for instance, at the end of the round, if no one has collected any dog cards, they're probably going to have to pay all of these goblins. And what will happen is they'll put money on top of these tiles for each one that they can't pass. And then whoever has the most dogs at the end of the round collects all of the tiles with any money on top of them. So it's kind of a different strategy for the game, but if you collect enough dogs to pass these goblins, you don't have to pay the goblins because you've matched their power to defeat them. And in addition, if you have the most dog cards, you get to collect all of the tiles and keep any money that's on top of them. Now, one important thing to mention is there's these numbers on the cards, or on the tiles, like there's 3, 1, and 1. You don't have to beat that cumulative number. You don't have to get 5 dog power to pass these goblins. You just have to get as much as the highest goblin to pass. So it's kind of like a check in a role-playing game. For instance, if you have this 2 right here, you would pass this goblin because it has 1 power and you have 2. You would pass this goblin because it has 1 power and you have 2. This goblin, you only have 2 power, so you would have to pay him $1 because you don't have at least 3 or more. If you were able to get this dog card and 1 more dog card, then you would pass all the goblins and you don't have to pay them anything. So, and we'll go into that more in detail later, but I just kind of want to explain a little bit about the different rounds. Alright, so when you're playing this game, you're going to be dealt 9 cards, like I said, to start your hand, to start the round. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to pick one of the cards and then pass the rest of the cards to your left or to your right, depending on what round it is. And that's going to continue until all the cards have been picked. Now, when you're looking at these cards, you're going to see a lot of different things. You're going to see money, you're going to see different colors with numbers associated, you're going to see dog cards, you're going to see special modifier cards. So what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about what each of these cards will do and how they will affect the round if you pick them. Now, like I said earlier, we're trying to get the maximum or the minimum number to get which treasure we think is most attractive. So the simplest strategy, the most straightforward way to play the game is to collect the colors and the numbers on those colors that you're wanting to achieve the highest or the lowest number to get the treasure. So, for instance, in this board state, the way it is right now, A very attractive treasure would be this one right here. That's 16 points straight up. This is a pretty good treasure, 10 points straight up. This one is pretty good as well. You can collect that treasure and then just collect a whole bunch of blue cards in later rounds and turn it in for a big score. And then this one right here is pretty good. This one, if you go with the dog strategy, which is just to collect as many goblin tiles as you can, this will pay you $2 at the end of the game for every tile that you have, in addition to $1 that the goblin tiles already earn at the end of the game. So that one can be very strong as well. But let's just say that we're just going to go for straight points. So right here, green is an attractive treasure for us. What we would do is we would start picking green cards. We would just try and say we're going to try and get the most in green to have the highest number there. So what you could do is you could say, all right, the highest green that I see in this hand is a green 7. You're going to pick that card, you put it down in front of you, that's your first selection. You then take all of these cards that are left, you pass them to the player to your left. Then the player to your right is going to pass you their hand of cards, which you will then get and start to look at. So right here we're looking through, there's no green cards, so we might have to pick a different type of card to play. Well, the red treasure was pretty good as well down there, or we could try and go ahead and get a dog card to protect ourselves from the little goblins that are going to come at us. I think we'll do that. We'll go ahead and pick a dog card and try and get past those goblins right there. And that's kind of how the drafting works. After you do that, you would take the remaining cards and pass them to your left again until all the cards are gone. Now that we've talked about that, let's go ahead and explain a little bit about the cards themselves. So when you're looking at the cards, these are pretty straightforward. Like I've explained earlier, these are just power that you can use at the end of the round. If you have the highest number total in green, then you get this treasure. If you have the lowest number total in green, then you get this treasure. There's also all sorts of modifier cards, and you're going to see them as you pass the hands around. There will be different cards that will allow you to modify your points, modify your score, cancel out bad cards that you get. So for instance, this ×2 modifier right here, there's one for every color in the game, and they will double the score of that particular color. Like you can see one right here. For instance, this will double the score of the red player, whoever plays this card. They will, if they play 10 points, they can play this card and double it to 20 and win the max treasure if they want to. Same thing with blue. There's also a card for green. These will double your power in any color. They do have to be played with the color that they are, though. So this one can't affect blue cards or green cards, and this one can't affect red cards or green cards. They can only affect the color that they are themselves. You're also going to see this card from time to time. This is a Sleeping Beauty card. What this card does is it protects you from a bad card that you may get handed. The tricky thing about drafting games is that you're going to keep on passing cards around the circle, and people aren't going to want to keep bad cards. Now, the last card that you get, you have to keep, and any card that you get for the colors, you have to play. So, for instance, if you were lucky enough the entire round to just draft a 1 or a 2 in blue, and you haven't gotten any high cards, so you're not in danger of getting that negative treasure, the very last card that's handed to you could be a blue 12. And then you'd be kind of up a creek, because you're probably going to have the highest score in blue if you do that. This card allows you to cancel out one card. So for instance, if you had collected the 1 in blue and then somebody passed you the 10 or the 12 or the 11, you could, after everyone had laid down their blue cards, you could modify your hand and place this over the blue 10 and cancel out that number and just have the 1. And that's just how the Sleeping Beauty card works. There's also some cards that will strengthen your hand and give you more power. There's cards that will make your hand less powerful if you're trying to get the minimum treasure. So for instance, there's this card right here. These are the Goblin Mercenaries. You pay the goblins $3 and they come and fight for you and make any color 8 more powerful. So if you were, going for the green right there and you only had, you were only 4 away from having the highest number there, you could pay $3 to the goblins, and they would strengthen your green number by 8, and that would let you win the game, or win that treasure at least. This card right here is simple enough. It just makes any color 4 more powerful. Same concept, but you don't have to pay to use this one. This is just a great artifact that you can throw out that'll help your case. There's also this one, like I said, the shrinking potion. This one will help you get the minimum number. If you really want this treasure, for instance, and you have a 3 and somebody else has laid down the 2, then you could place this card over your 3. Now you have the 1, and you would be able to take the minimum treasure because of this shrinking potion. The other couple cards you could see, the Mystery Mule, this one's pretty great. It just allows you to draw another card. The nice thing about this is it can be played in any round, so after everybody's laid down all their blue cards, you could say, alright, I'm going to Mystery Mule. You could play this card, and then you get to draw another card off the top of the deck and use it. For instance, if it was a blue card, you could play it that round and make your hand more powerful. If it's not a blue card, you just get to keep it and maybe use it later in the round. Like this one, for instance, would be useful during the dog phase. You get another strength in dogs there, and that will help you later on in the game. You're also going to see, speaking of dogs, you're going to see a Scare Goblin from time to time. This card just means that you don't have to pay the dogs anything, or the goblins, rather. You don't have to pay the goblins anything. You don't have to collect dog cards because you have the Scare Goblin. It just means that you don't have to pay them. You will not win the dogs, with the dogs, or get to collect the goblin tiles, but this will just protect you and you won't have to pay the goblins. So that's a cool card to have as well. Other than that, the other cards to talk about, instead of just the colors, are the money. You're going to see from time to time, and we saw them earlier, cards that have just straight money on them. These cards are good because, like I said, money is points. This card is essentially 3 points. 3 points. 1 point at the end of the round after all of the treasures have been claimed and after all of the goblins have been fought. You lay down these cards and they get the money that's printed on them. So if you lay down these 2 cards at the end of the round, you'd get 6 points. Alright, so let's say we're at the end of the round and we've all drafted our hand of 9 cards and we are ready to start playing down to compete for treasures and try and pass goblins. I'm going to just go through a quick example hand so you can see how actual gameplay works once you've drafted all the cards. What we're going to do is we're going to start off by scoring blue. So what'll happen is any blue card that you have drafted, as far as like a 1 through 12, you have to play. So, for instance, this player 1 right here would lay down their blue 10, and then player 2, I'm sorry, has managed to collect, unfortunately, a 9 and a 12 there. So, player 2's hand is not quite as attractive in this case because the maximum treasure up there is a negative number. So right now, the way that it sits, player 2 has, 21 power, and player 1 has 10. So player 1 is sitting pretty. They are going to get the minimum treasure, and then player 2 looks like they're going to get stuck with the negative treasure. But at this point in the phase, what will happen is, in turn order, players will have the chance to modify their numbers. So let's say, for instance, that player 1 would say, alright, I've got a 10, I'm not going to modify because I'm happy with my numbers right now. Player 2 would then have a chance to say, well, you know what, I managed to draft a Sleeping Beauty card. Now, if you remember what we talked about earlier, a Sleeping Beauty will cancel out 1 bad card, so player 2 might have been handed this 12. What they could do is they could say, well, I'm going to modify. I'm going to place this over my 12. And now, player 2 is the player with the lowest number in this color. So then player 1 would have a chance to modify. Now in this case, player 1 doesn't really have anything that'll help them out, so the end of the round would, the end of that phase would happen, and player 1 would get the maximum treasure because they have the highest number. They've got the negative over here, And then player 2, since they were able to draft that Sleeping Beauty, would be able to keep the good treasure right there. Then you'd move on to the green phase. So player 1 would lay out any green cards that they had managed to collect, and then player 2 would do the same thing. So we've got for green, let's see, we've got 11 total power right here, and then for player 2 we have, looks like, a 12. Okay, so those cards would be laid out, and then in the exact same thing would happen. Player 1 would say, you have a chance to modify. Now, right now, player 1 has the lowest number in green. They've got an 11, and player 2 is beating them by 1 with this color, and player 1 really wants this higher treasure. That's what they drafted for. They tried to get as many green cards as they could. Well, player 1 would say, you know what, I'm going to modify. So player 1 has this flaming sword. What they could do is they could say, all right, I'm going to place this flaming sword down. I now have a 15 instead of an 11, and then player 2 would have a chance to modify their numbers, and they don't have anything that would help in this case. So player 1 would win the maximum treasure with their higher number, and then player 2 would get the lowest number right here, the lowest treasure, because they have the lowest number. You then move on to red. So now in this case, player 1 doesn't have any red cards. Okay, so player 1 is not playing any red cards. Player 2, on the other hand, did draft a few red cards, so they've got 10 right here, and they're going to lay down their red cards right there. And in a case where one player is the only one who's gone for a treasure, that player gets both the treasures. So in this instance, this is really good for red because no one else has drafted any red cards. So player 2 would get both treasures, and they're both great treasures. And that's how that would work in that case. Now, to modify, player 2 also had drafted this card. If anybody else had played numbers that might have been higher, player 2 could have said, I'm going to modify, I'm going to double my points. So they would have ended up with a 20 instead of a 10. So that's another modifier card right there. So now that we've gone through all of the treasures and we've scored those, that's how that would shake out. We would go to the Goblin phase. Now for the Goblin phase, what we're going to have to do is try and pass these Goblin tiles right here with enough strength with our dogs. So player 2 has managed to collect 3 dogs. They could play those dogs down. Now player 1 didn't collect any dogs, but they did collect the Scare Goblin. So player 1 would say, you know what, I've got the Scare Goblin, I'm good. I don't have to pay the goblins anything. And since player 2 has the highest number of dogs, they collect all of the goblin tiles and any money that might have been put on them. Now player 1 had a Scare Goblin, so they don't pay anything. And then player 2 keeps those tiles, puts them over to the side, and those are his tiles for in-game scoring. Now, that round was very good for player 2 because they managed to get this treasure that gives them $2 extra at the end of the game for all of these tiles that they collect. So already at the end of the game, this player is going to have 6 extra points. Really good round for player 2. Now, after all of that has been scored, after all those treasures have been scored, after the goblins have been faced, player 1 managed to draft a couple of money cards. This is the point when you collect any money from these cards. So player 1 would get $5, which is essentially 5 points, and that would be placed in their reserve. Now, the Mystery Mule we didn't use in the round explanation, but this card basically allows you to draw an extra card during any color phase. You can't use it during the dog phase, but you can use this to draw a new card. So whenever we were modifying our numbers, instead of playing a plus or minus modifier card, you could say I'm going to use a Mystery Mule, play that card down, and just draw another card from the top of the deck. Now if it's something like this, you just use it when it's when it's used normally, so this one would be just paid to you at the end of the round. But if it was a blue card, for instance, and you were needing to get a higher or lower blue number, that might help you out. So that's how the mystery mule works. After all of those tiles have been scored, you're going to gather up all the cards, shuffle them up again, deal out 9 cards to each player, and just put new treasures down on the board to compete for. And you're going to move to round 2. This is going to be done for 5 rounds. After those 5 rounds have been played, the game is over. Whoever has the most money and points wins the game. Alright, so that's how you play Treasure Hunter. It's a very straightforward game. It is one that plays fairly quickly, and it's one that has easy accessibility for a lot of different players that I've introduced it to. It's been a really big hit with everybody that I've played it with, and it's just a simple, fun game. There's not a lot of complexity to it as far as fiddly rules or really confusing walls of text in the rule book, but it has enough strategic depth where you still feel like you're getting a really solid gameplay experience, but it doesn't feel like you are bogged down in just hours and hours of rules explanations and analysis paralysis and all the different things that you can kind of deal with. This game is straightforward, simple, fun. The artwork is fantastic. The components are really great. Big fan of this game. This game wasn't really on my radar because of just the glut of games that came out in 2015. I saw it come out and I saw that it was Richard Garfield, so I was excited about it, but then it just kind of got pushed by the wayside by, like I said, all of these other exciting games that were coming out. I finally got a chance to try it at BGG Spring, and absolutely from the first hand of cards that I drew, knew I was going to love this game. This one is very highly rated in my book. I think I've rated it an 8 or an 8.5, and I will not go down on that. This game has been fantastic. I've played it about 20 times since the spring, and it's still one that I pull out probably at least once or twice every couple of weeks. We play it, sometimes more, sometimes we'll play it 2-3 times just in 1 week alone. This game is fantastic, one that I love quite a bit. A lot of people have said that it can get too repetitive. I disagree. Most good games have some form of repetitive nature, like unless you're dealing with a legacy game or something like that. So anyway, big fan of this game. My review will have a lot more thoughts as to what I like about the game. This one was mainly just meant to show you how to play it. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email the dicey@gmail.com or just leave a comment on my webpage. So I hope you enjoyed the content, and until next time, I'll see you at the table.